Chapter 27 will focus on development and hereditary. Just to give an introduction to the whole chapter, in this chapter we're going to talk about how human development begins with fertilization. We're going to learn what fertilization is, through the unit of gametes, meaning the sperm and the egg, and then how that continues after that. So through this specific human development, the field is called developmental biology, and it is a science that studies changes in forms and function from when the egg gets fertilized by the sperm all the way through the old age, meaning adulthood. Embryology is a study of events that occur during approximately 38 weeks of development inside the mother's womb. So when the mother is pregnant, holding the embryo or the fetus. And then you have the prenatal period where what the mother goes through, those 38 weeks, what happens in her womb and what happens in her in her body through pregnancy. And then you have the final stage, which is the fetal period. This one lasts week 9 to 38 until gestation, meaning until birth. And this is going to now be called the fetus. So weeks 0 to 8 is going to be called an embryo, and then 9 to 38 now is a fetus. And you're going to see in this chapter how all the organs and everything, all the system starts to develop without the assistance of the mother. So then after birth, the fetus is a newborn, and then this is called now the postnatal period, which then life begins. There's different levels of that. And then you have the postnatal period, which begins with the birth and continues through all the life stages. Now going back to the 3 stages of the prenatal development, there's whether we say 38 weeks, I know that that's like the full term already. And we're going to talk about these 3 stages in the next slide. Okay. So you have here the pre-embryonic period. This happens weeks 1 to 2. And in this example, in this case, is you have one cell, you could call it a zygote, which is, it's a zygote that is composed of many cells that divide through mitosis. And then now you have a multicellular blastocyst, which is then going to implant in the uterus. We'll learn how this happens as well. Weeks 3 to 8 is when you have the blastocyte grows, and now you start to form all the organ systems, and you have the embryo. So the embryo is called 3 to 8. And then weeks 9 to 38, or until you give birth, 40, 41, 42, depending on the birth, that is now you call a fetus. So the fetal period is when the fetus grows larger, develops all the organs, and starts getting all of the functions that is required when they need to be born when they're newborns. Okay, and then we have the postnatal period, which is this is the rapid development changes that continues after the birth. And there's 5 stages. It extends from the birth to 1 month. Infancy is developed until 2 years of age. So after 2 years of age, they are going to now be called child, so childhood. And this childhood is going to then develop until they reach sexual maturation, meaning puberty. After that, they are becoming an adolescent, and then they're going to then finish their whole, adolescence is tied into also adulthood. But here in adolescence is where they finish their sexual reproduction, so meaning all of their sexual organs, everything, they're ready to conceive. And then finally we have adulthood, which it's like an extension of adolescence until death. And this is going to mainly, instead of developing the organs, now they're going to be degenerated until the death. So eventually it will lead to death, and then of course there's no specific date. Like it's not like, oh yeah, once you're born, everybody lives until 60, 100. Depending of course on the individual's lifestyle, they can live how many years. Okay, so these first couple of slides were just an overview. We're going to talk about those more in detail. But the first step of sexual reproduction has to be fertilization. And what does that mean is that when the sperm goes into the egg, okay? By the way, when we say egg, we're going to call it the oocyte. So the sperm cell fertilizes the oocyte, which is just another name for the egg. to form a zygote. Those are remember the zygote was like the 1 to 2 weeks. And then it's going to continue to be a blastocyte, be implanted in the uterine wall, and then there it's going to go through these development changes. Now, meiosis is a process of the sex cell's reproduction, so the sperm and the egg, how they divide. Genetically, every single cell, at least from the sperm and the egg, are considered a haploid, 1N. What does that mean? Is that they have half the number of chromosomes, meaning each has 23 chromosomes, one copy of each of those chromosomes. Once the egg and the sperm fertilize, the oocyte and the sperm fertilize, now it is 2N, so 46. So the egg has 23 chromosomes and the sperm has 23 chromosomes. Once fertilization happens, those 23 chromosomes fuse and you have a total of 46. So this is stating that mother has the same number of chromosomes and that as well. So you have two copies of each of these genes or genetic DNA. So both gametes are going to contribute equally in the chromosome number, and therefore there is genetic. This is going to form the genetics of the offspring, meaning the baby. The sperm must travel a long distance, of course. They do swim. They do have this flagella. You can see it here. Just like bacteria, they do swim, and they have to reach, of course, the egg. Now, the oocyte, by the way, when I say egg is oocyte, the oocyte is not motile. It just stays there. The sperms have to do all the work and reach the egg. Okay, talking more about the sperm. Sperm, how does it get introduced into the egg? Of course, through semen. And semen is a combination of sperm, cells, and also fluid. Now, the sperm, they are produced every single day. But in terms of the oocyte, only fertilization can happen for 24 hours, so meaning when the oocyte is viable, so meaning you could say the sperm can reach it, is only for 24 hours after it's released. So every month, women have their periods. That is because 2 weeks before the period, there was an egg, oocyte that was released, and if it's not fertilized, then it just causes the whole bleeding and all that. If not, it results in pregnancy. Now, it is said that you could introduce a sperm into the female reproductive tract 3 days before. I'm sorry, with a 3-day window, 2 days before ovulation day and 1 day after. Because remember, the egg is available or the oocyte is available for 24 hours. So you could say it's 3 days, 2 before and 2 after. And 1 after ovulation. If it is successful, like I said, the sperm will fuse with the one sperm only. There's exceptions, which we'll talk about in just a moment. But they state that it has to reach the egg. So the sperm have to go migrate to the oocyte. So here we have the sperm, and then this is the oocyte. They have to reach, and like I mentioned, they have sperm's tails to help them move. Prostaglandins in the semens, they're going to stimulate uterine contractions, and they're going to assist the sperm into from the father to move to the female reproductive tract. So the female reproductive tract does know and understand that if there is some type of sexual interaction, the uterine contractions can assist the sperm into reaching the oocyte, which that is the whole point of the sperm and the male and reproductive organs is for fertilization. And like I mentioned, once again, the migration of the sperm is leading to fertilization. Okay, so now the whole process, when the sperm reaches the oocyte, the egg, here you're going to notice that it's trying to go in there. How does it do it? Is because it releases these enzymes. By the way, these enzymes are called hydrocolloronidase, and they're going to start breaking the membrane of the oocyte. Okay. And these enzymes, like I said, main goal is to break down so that a sperm can go there. Now, if you notice here, there is these sperm binding receptors. These is what the oocytes provide. These receptors are going to recognize that it is the sperm cell. And then once they recognize that it is a sperm cell, we're going to look at it in the next slide. Then it is going to break through, if you notice here. Now it is going in there, but only the nuclei, when the purple goes in, the tail stays behind. Another thing that happens here is that once one sperm cell is let in, you could say, the sperm binding receptors, if you notice, they dissolve. Okay, so they're destroyed. Why? Is because if there's any other sperm that is trying to go in, they can't go in without those receptors. So only one sperm cell is supposed to go inside of the oocyte. Okay, so here we see that one is already saying, hey, you have to go because we already have one in here, and then there's no more receptors to receive the sperm. Okay, so now what happens when the sperm's nuclei is in? Here's how it looks like. It's going to swell up like so to form something called a pronucleus. And this is where the meiosis 2 happens. The chromosomes are now dividing. I'm sorry, yeah. They're not dividing, but they're breaking into their halves. And then here, if you notice the female pronucleus, this one also is going to go through meiosis 2. And if you notice now the chromosomes, in this case will be 23 for the sperm, 23 for the oocyte. Then they're going to fuse. So if they think of this as a sperm, chromosomes is the egg. And there's going to be spindle fibers through kind of like mitosis that are going to then arrange the chromosomes and put them together in pairs. Okay. So then after that happens, after there was a successful fertilization, once again, here you have the sperm that is trying to get inside of the egg. Meiosis 2 happens here. The sperm successfully goes in, and then it is now going to fuse with the pronucleus of the ovum. So this day 1, when the sperm are fertilized the egg, here you have the pronucleus that are fusing, and now you have a zygote that has both of the chromosomes. And by the way, this is the uterus, the uterine wall. Okay. And if you notice, they start here. This, by the way, will be like day 1. So here's day 1. After day 1, it will be right here. If you notice, it's kind of starting to go down the uterine wall. And after, then it is going to day 2. If you notice that one cell split into 2, and then it splits into 4. So after day 2, that zygote has 4 cells, and if you notice, it's here at this point. And then after day 3, that 4 divided into 8 cells, and then now you have a multicellular zygote that, if you notice, now it is now at this point here. After day 4, you're going to have your blastocyst, which is here. And after days 4 to 7, if you notice, now it's going to stay there. That is mainly where it's going to grow. The inner clusters of the rounded cells are going to be the inner mass of the embryoblast. So now you have the end result is an embryoblast that we're going to learn what happens with it in the next couple of slides. Okay, now before we learn what happens to the blast in the uterus, we do have to talk about the different types of fertilization. So sometimes the first 8 days after fertilization, that same zygote splits into 2 different individuals, where they're going to call monozygote, meaning mono 1. They're identical, just that zygote for whatever reason split into 2. That is how identical twins result. So one sperm fertilized that oocyte, one zygote was formed, but then that zygote split into two. So they're usually going to share the same, I guess, placenta and same space in the uterus. Very rarely will you have triplets, meaning that the zygote divided into three, or even quadruplets. These are going to be identical monozygote quadruplets. That zygote now divided three more times, resulting in four. A dizygote, di2, means that specifically fraternal twins. So it happened that probably different sperms fertilize two secondary oocytes at the same time. So two oocytes, two eggs were fertilized at the same time. So they have separate sperms and separate oocytes. That is why sometimes they result in different sexes. They look different because the sperm and the oocyte are not the same. And the result sometimes can even have multiple relations of triplets. So three sperms fertilize three oocytes, or even quadruplets 4 times, or even sometimes even greater numbers than 4. Okay, so after the 4 to 7 days after the blastocyte is attached to the endometrium uterus, so if you remember, it started as a single cell zygote, and then little by little the cells started to divide until it reached here. So days 4 to 7, here you have, it's considered a triple blast because it has those 3 tissues. But here it attaches to the stratum functionalis of the endometrium lining of the uterus. Okay. Here is the inner mass. Okay. After, and by the way, the cytoplast is a cellular trophoblast, which remains intact. And then the centroplast is just the syncytial triploblast, which the membrane, plasma membrane disappears, and they kind of merge, and they're like a multinucleated cell, meaning one cell that has many nucleus. So then day 5 happens, and after day 5, you notice that the hypoblast and the epiblast are formed. And here, like I said, the membrane starts to break down. Now it doesn't look like this, more or less. Okay. And then at day 12, you're going to notice that the lacunae is filled with maternal blood, so you see blood supply already being introduced. You start to also see the amniotic cavity, okay? And you even start to see uterine glands for the support of also the soon-to-be embryo. Just some insight on that. This is the time where the human chronic gonadotropin, or HCG hormone, is starting to form. This is a hormone that when you take a pregnancy test, that's what it's looking for. If the hormone is present, and that means that you are pregnant. And what this hormone does is that it is going to stimulate the corpus luteum in the ovary. And it is going to secrete estrogen and proestrogen. And this is going to promote the placental development. So only pregnant females have placenta, and that is how you know it's for sure pregnancy. The progesterone is going to suppress the menstruation, so instead of every month dropping an egg and going through your period, it stops because their whole reproductive structure of the female not supposed to just concentrate in the embryo, the fetus. Like I said, the HCG hormone, the human chronic gonadotropin hormone, this is the one that is found in the urine of the pregnant women, and that is how it gives you a positive pregnancy result. The HCG level rise in the mother's blood until maybe the 2nd month of development, and this is when the membrane chorion, which we'll talk about exactly what this means in just a moment, but now it is going to take the role of the corpus luteum and start secreting estrogen and progesterone. So normally the HCG hormone drops after that 2nd month, when the first couple of months of pregnancy. At this point, the HCG is no longer needed, so the levels decline. Even though the woman is still pregnant, that hormone is only at the beginning of the pregnancy. Okay, so then once that happens, then you start to notice that there is more blood supply that you see here from the mother. You also have the glands. And now you start to see the different tissues, the initial tissues, or you could call them primary germ layers. These are going to be the ones that develop into future organs. So here you have the ectoderm in the blue, the mesoderm in the red, and then you also have the endoderm, which will be here in the yellow. Normally, they will give rise to, like I said, the digestive system, the nervous system, the circulatory system, and all the organs, and each one has their own function that way. If for whatever reason the conceptus is not viable, for example, let's say that you don't have the right number of chromosomes, and they're abnormally, and those chromosomes are required for the embryo development, then of course this whole process may cause an spontaneous abortion or a miscarriage, and the pregnancy will end. On rare occasions with a blastocyte implant on a site that are different from the uterus, it does happen. This is called an ectopic pregnancy. The pregnancy still continues, but it's in a different part that is not the uterus part that you see right here. Okay. So once all the whole blastocyte is ready, everything is good in the uterine, or sometimes not if it's an ectopic pregnancy. Now you start to notice that the embryonic disc and the trophoblast together, they're going to produce the extraembryonic membranes. And this is going to appear like in the second week of development and continue throughout the whole embryonic and fetal periods. Remember, embryonic is the first weeks, and then after it will be the fetus. So you're going to notice, like, here is the first stages. You're going to notice a yolk sac. And this yolk sac is going to give the nutrients here in the yellow. You also see the allantoids, which eventually will develop into the umbilical cord. And then you see the chorion. Okay. The embryo proper, which is where the embryo is going to start forming. The amniotic cavity. The amnion, which is you can see the surface tissue that is protecting the amniotic cavity. The stratum functionalis will be here. You also have the chronic villi, okay, which we'll talk about in more in detail as in the next coming slide. But here the chorion villi are found around the entire surface of the chorion, okay. And once again, the yolk sac, its main functions, of course, not only for female humans, but also some animals like birds and like animals that release eggs. This is a nutrition for the little offspring. In humans, the yolk sac is part of the digestive tract, and it is going to be the first source for blood cells and vessels, supply blood for blood. And then the yolk cell is also going to produce the first germ cells, the first tissues that are going to then be precursors for gametes, and then eventually develop into the ovaries or testes. If it's a female, it's ovaries. If it's a male, then it will be testes. The amnion, which is here, that's the surface level surrounding the amniotic cavity. This one is going to be transparent, and it develops from the epiblast, which is one of the first tissues. It eventually is going to enclose the embryo and fill it with amniotic cavity. It's also going to penetrate the umbilical cord, and this is going to, by the way, the umbilical cord is vessels that are connected from the mother to the mother's blood supply to the embryo or fetus. The amniotic fluid, which is inside, being surrounded by the amnia, it is going to be filled with fluid, and also it's going to, any waste is going to be filtered by the mother's blood. So the embryo does produce urine, and it contributes to the amniotic fluid that's inside the amniotic cavity. And like I said, it kind of is going to serve as a kidneys until the little fetus's kidneys are formed, and then it could do the job of how they're supposed to do it. So the amniotic fluid is to protect the embryo from trauma, any pressure or anything, and from, of course, drying out. It helps maintain constant temperature. It allows further freedom and muscle development, and it prevents body parts from adhering to each other. So it kind of helps with the development and the different body parts, since they're starting to form, for them to kind of like stick to each other. Now we have the allantoids, and the allantoids is going to be the blood vessels that are going to then develop into the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord, like I said, it connects the mother's blood supply to the embryo or fetus, and it allows to bring oxygenated, meaning blood that has oxygen, to the little fetus or embryo, and then any waste like carbon dioxide is going to go back to the mother's blood and it's going to be filtered out by her body. The chorion, which is this whole section here, it is the outermost embryonic membrane that develops into the trypoblast and synchrotriotropoblast, which encloses the membranes of the whole embryo. If you notice here, you're going to see the chronic microvilli, which are going to also be studded with vessels. This is going to serve as being around the entire surface of the chorion. By the late week 4, the development of the chronic villi are blended with the stratum functionalis, which was over here. And then it's going to it's going to begin to form the principal embryonic parts of the placenta. So the placenta doesn't form fully until after these first couple of weeks. Okay, so we're going to talk about the embryonic period. Like I said, the first couple of weeks is going to be the embryo, and then after that it's going to be the fetus. But the embryonic period begins at the 3rd week of development and continues to the 8th week. The blastocyst is fully implanted in the uterus, and the inner mass is differentiated into bioluminar embryonic disc. And these membranes are going to, like I said, be the first ones to develop for the embryo. So the embryonic period starts with the process as gastrulation. And this is a rearrangement of the 3 layers or trimineral layers of the embryonic disc. So here you have in the yellow, the endoderm. Here is the mesoderm in the red, and then the ectoderm is here in the blue. So this is the trimineral embryonic disc. These are the 3 layers, and it's kind of easy because the endoderm is kind of like facing the fetus. And then here you have the derm in the middle, and then the ectoderm is a surface, you could say, tissue that is surrounding the fetus. These 3 germ layers all are going to become major organ systems. The process called organogenesis, and this is going to start developing the organs by the week 8. The placenta is also going to start forming during this period, and it's going to provide more nutrition and more oxygen, so these little organs also start to form. So it's going to even remove waste from the embryo. Okay, so once again, here is our embryo, and the yellow is here, the endo, meso, and then here in the blue is you have the ectoderm. Okay, but the following events are going to develop in the formation of germ layers. So in week 3, the biluminar embryonic disc contains 2 cell layers. So before week 3, you only have the the epipoblast and the hydroblast, and then later they develop into the 3 germ layers. At this point, you could also start to see that the cephalic caducle, so the head-tail region of the embryo is starting to form. So for example, here you could see it's the head, and then this is the tail of the 2 layers. Okay, so the head and then the tail. Also, even you can start to notice that the right and the left sides, the dorsal and ventral, meaning the front of the little embryo, and then the back of the embryo as well. And here, okay, so through gastrulation, there is regions to formally the development and they complete the development. And here it starts as cells detach from the epiblast. So here is the epiblast in the blue, which it will then develop into the 3 layers, the endoderm, mesoderm, and ectoderm. The first cells are going to migrate this way, become the inner layer, which will be the endoderm. And then this is going to replace the hypoblast, which was here in the yellow. And then here in the middle, you're going to notice that those layers are going to then be replaced by the mesoderm. And then the remaining part, which will be in the blue, will be the ectoderm. So first, you have 2 tissues, the epiblast and the hypoblast. And then after the 3 weeks, by the end of the 3rd week, you're going to have your 3 tissues. The embryo is now going to become a trimineral embryo disc instead of being a 2-tissue or 2-disc embryo. The endoderm and the ectoderm and the endoderm are going to be tightly packaged surrounding the mesoderm, which is in the middle. Okay, so how do you measure the, the development? So this is week 3. The cephalocaudal folding will be here, and then the little tail, you could say, will be right here. If you look at it from side to side, it will be head, tail. I'm sorry, no, the head probably will be here, and then the tail will be in the back. After the 4th early week, you're going to see that there's even more significant folding. This would be the head. This would be the tail. If you look at it from side to side, this probably will be the head, and then behind will be the tail. By late week 3, this is how fast it does it. If you notice now, the ectoderm is very, very thick. The head, the tail, you even start to see the early heart being formed here. And this is how it looks like from side to side. So if you notice now, it's thicker, it's bigger, and by even the starting of the end of week 4, you start to see a little heart already form. Okay, so now we're going to focus more on the organogenesis, so when the organs start to form from the first tissues. So the organogenesis is when the 3 primary germ layers, now they start to form the organs and the organ system. So the digestive tract, the circulatory tract, and all that. So when organogenesis begins, the primary layers undergo cephalocaudal, meaning the head, tail, in transverse folding side to side, at the beginning to differentiate the embryo, and this happens, like I said, in those early stages. The embryo right now will be about like 15 millimeters or 6 inches long. When the embryonic period ends, which will be at the end of week 8, then the embryo will be 25 millimeters, about 1 inch long, and now you're going to start to see its little organ systems. Of course, they're going to look exactly how yours do, but you're going to start to notice that they do. So here we have the first couple of weeks. So this is at the end of week 4. You start to notice there's a little ear forming, there's the eye, the forebrain, the heart is here. There's just going to be a little arm eventually, a little egg. And of course, it doesn't look like a human, but this will be like the cephalocaudal head tail idea. So the ectoderm is going to be forming, ecto meaning out, the skin, and is also going to be responsible for forming the nervous system, including the spinal cord, the brain, and all of that. The ectoderm is going to be the first part of the organogenesis. So these are the first organs that start to form. The cells of the ectoderm are going to thicken. They're going to form a neural plate. They're going to fold inward, and then they're going to fuse to form the neural tube, which pinches into the ectodermal layer. The anterior end of the neural tube will become the brain, and the remaining will be the spinal cord, and kind of you could see it here, which we know that the brain is connected to the spinal cord, and then later, little by little, it's going to get enlarged, and it's going to then develop into the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain, which are going to be responsible for controlling different functions in the body. Okay. The neural crest between the cells, the layers of the ectoderm, like I said, they're going to form the epidermis, which will be the skin, the neural tube, and then they're going to migrate throughout the embryo and give rise to the cranial, the spinal, the sympathetic ganglia, and associated nerves. They're also going to be responsible for the pigmentation of the cells of the skin. They're going to also be in charge of making the cells of the adrenal medulla, which is part of the brain, and also the connective tissue. The mesodermal cells underneath the primary streak of the nodal cord, they're going to serve and support and organize the embryo around the axis. And then the remnants of the nodal cord, by the way, nodal cord is like that long cord that goes from the head to here, kind of like the spinal cord, you could say, but it's not really a spinal cord yet. And it is going to, like I said, develop into the vertebrae, which is the bones that protect the spinal cord. The mesoderm is going to, of either side of the nodal term, is going to form somites that you see here, these little foldings. And they're going to have three regions. The chlorotome develops into the vertebrae and ribs. The dermatome develops into the dermal layer of the skin. And the mootome develops into most of the skeletal muscles. On the lateral sides of the somites, you're going to notice that there's clusters of the mesoderm. You can't really see it here, but they're going to be called intermediate mesoderms or sheets of lateral plate mesoderms. These are going to be intermediate forms of gonads, the kidneys, and then also the mesoderm is responsible for developing the spleen, adrenal cortex, cardiovascular system, serous membranes of the body cavities, and also connective tissue that is components of the limbs. On the lateral sides of the somites, it's not here, but it was in the previous slides. You're gonna have intermediate mesoderms, which, like I said, they're part of the lateral plate, and I kind of added this twice. Sorry. But then the endoderm is going to then form the cavities of the middle ear and auditory tube, which will be here. The becomes internal epithelial layers of the digestive system, respiratory, urinary. It also going to form several glands and accessory digestive organs, including the thyroid glands, the parotid glands, thymus, the parts of the palatine tonsils. Here, this endoderm is also responsible for most of the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas as well. Okay, so after that, after the 8 weeks, that was the embryo. Now it's going to be the fetus. So the fetal period is going to be weeks 9 to 38 or even more. And during the pre-embryonic period, the development of the embryo receives nutrients from the uterine milk that are secreted by the endometrial glands that were surrounding the chorion. And these endometrial cells are going to then be part of the uterine wall. The embryo continues to receive nutrition from digested endometrial cells until, of course, the placenta is developed. That's when it gets its nutrients. Once it's fully formed, which is about week 12, then the fetal period is going to begin. Okay, so now how does the placenta start to form? This process is called placentation, and it is the process of forming a disc-shaped placenta. So it looks like a disc, like a circular round structure, and it attaches to the uterine wall, and the embryo or fetus is going to be connected to the mother by the umbilical cord. So the placenta is considered an organ that only female pregnant women have, and it is going to be expelled from the body once the infant is born. So you could say that when birth is happening, the mother gives birth to the newborn, but also the placenta. But main function of the placenta is to exchange oxygen, nutrients, and waste from the mother to the fetus. The placenta also produces hormones to support the pregnancy. So blood that has oxygen goes to the fetus, and then any waste like carbon dioxide goes out of the placenta to the mother. Placentation begins during implantation, which is mainly the whole process of when the placenta is growing in the fetal period. So here is the uterus, I'm sorry, here's the chorion. Here is the amnion, the allantois, which is the umbilical cord. Here's the yolk sac, if you notice now it is smaller. And then here is the placenta, which will be this whole region here. Okay. Now, more detail about the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord is going to connect, like I said, the placenta to the fetus. The fetus's belly button, which is called the umbilicus. This cord normally has two umbilical arteries. Here in the blue, they're smaller. And even notice they spread out. And it's also going to have an umbilical vein, which is going to be in the red. So it's three vessels, two arteries in the blue, and one vein in the red. So the arteries are going to carry deoxygenated blood away from the fetus, so away from the fetus to the mother's bloodstream, and the vein is going to carry blood that has oxygen to the little fetus, heart. The umbilical cord also contains soft connective tissue with jelly-like consistency, so you're going to feel it like it's squishy, just like jelly. It's called Wharton's jelly because he discovered it. But it like that because it's going to insulate and protect the umbilical arteries and the vein, which are important, kind of like your heart and all your vessels. The external surface is covered by the amniotic membrane. And here, when the embryonic period begins, the blastocyte has implanted in the uterus. The chorionic villi have penetrated the uterine vessel from the lacunae, and they're filled with the maternal blood. So if you notice here, this is where the maternal blood would be, these spaces right here. And then once placentation has begun, the stratum fictionalis is going to, of the uterus, is now the deducica, which will be here. And this is the region beneath the fetus becomes the deductio bassalis, which would be here. This region surrounds the uterine cavity, forms the ducta capillaris. This is all the blood supply from the mother and the fetus and back and forth. Okay, so how does the placenta supply nutrients, oxygen, and then how does it remove waste? It is, like I said, a unique organ only found in pregnant mothers, and it is going to develop from both fetal chorionic villi and maternal deductio bassalis structures. And what happens here is that here you have the fetal blood capillarity, so this is the blood of the fetus. Here's the fetus endometrial cells. You can see there's a nucleus in them. The fetal basal lamina, which is the tissues facing the inner part of the body. Fetal connective tissue, which is normally the tissue that connects two other tissues together. The citrophoblasts, these are the cells here. The synchrotriophoblasts, the maternal basal lamina, and the maternal's blood. So here, any blood that has oxygen from the mother's blood is going to go to the little fetal's blood. Even nutrients, all those ions, are going to go through here. Any waste that is produced by the little fetus, including carbon dioxide, is going to go back to the mother's blood as well. And then, like I said, placentation, the whole point, I kind of mentioned already in the previous slide, but it brings oxygenated blood, so blood cells that have oxygen, to the little fetus, and then any deoxygenated blood, meaning carbon dioxide, it brings it back to the mother's bloodstream. In addition to these nutritive functions of this gas exchange of the oxygen, it is also going to function as an endocrine organ, which is going to produce HCG, that is our human chorionic gonadotrophin, and it is going to result in the reduction of the synchrotropoblast. The progesterone hormone is going to increase. This is going to stop the whole, you could say, period, and pregnancy can still going to allow it to be continued. The placenta is also going to produce this placental prostaglandin and human placental lactogen, which is preparing the mammary glands of the mother for milk production. So this placenta also helps with that. Also, it helps produce the hormone relaxin, which relaxes the body's muscles, joints, and ligaments to, of course, stretch during delivery of the newborn. Okay. So in terms of the fetal development, it is characterized by maturation of the tissues, organs, and the fetal growth is rapid and fetal size increases dramatically. Normally, the measurements are measured through the crown rump length, CRL, and crown heel length, CHL. The embryo is about 25 millimeters in length, about 1 inch, and it can grow up to 50 centimeters or 19.17 inches during the fetal period. Of course, since it's growing, weight is going to increase. Of course, you're going to see it in the first 8 weeks, but after that, it can range from 3.2 to 3.5 kilograms, which is 7 to 18 pounds when the little newborn is born. So the major events of the fetal development, which remember after the 8th week, that is considered the fetus, before that is the embryo. And months 3 to 9 of pregnancy, month 3, the body starts to lengthen. So you're going to notice that it starts growing, the head. The upper limbs are also going to grow, ossification, meaning the bones are going to start to harden. The eyes are going to be developed, but they're going to be to the side, not facing forward just yet. You're going to see that the eyelids are fused, the nose is going to start to develop, and the ears are also going to start to notice as well. Genitals are also disguisable. It's going to be determined if it's male or female. And at this point, the crown rump length is about 9 centimeters, so 3.5 inches. Month 4th, once again, the body's still growing. You have lower length and joints. The fetus nipples are going to start to form as well as the hair. Kidneys are well formed by now, so it doesn't really need the mother's placenta to kind of diffuse the waste. I'm sorry, it does need it, but it doesn't need the cells that did that before. Digestive glands are forming, and you could hear now a heartbeat through this testicle. The reflexes start to form, so you're going to notice that it gets startled, it turns away, and loud noises or even bright lights. And at this point, the crown rump length is 40 centimeters, about 5.5 inches by the 4th month. Month 5, it grows a little slower, and the limbs are also starting to achieve like their correct form or proportions. Because I know that the limbs were a little smaller than like the head. More hair starts to develop, and then even they start to have cells and sebum, the vernix carnosa. These are here to protect the skin from the amniotic fluid. Brown fat, adults have white fat, that's what they call it. And this is going to, of course, help insulate, produce heat for the fetus. Mother can now feel the little fetus move, which is a movement called quickening. And by this point, the little fetus is about 19 centimeters, 7.5 inches. Month 6, the fetus starts now to gain significant weight. You notice that there's eyebrows, eyelashes, now it has eyelids that can now open and close. The skin is wrinkled at this point, but the lungs start to begin to produce a suffocant, which if infants that are born early, sometimes they need assistance with this. By the end of month 6, the little fetus is 23 centimeters, 9.1 inches. Month 7, the eyelids now completely open. The fat deposited in the subcutaneous tissue, so the skin is going to feel smoother, not wrinkly as much or even red. The fetus now turns upside down. It's now getting ready to use its vertex position, so head first. In males, the testes are going to start to descend, even the inguinal canal of the scrotum as well. By the end of the 7th month, the fetus is about 28 centimeters, about 11 inches. And then months 8 and 9, this is considered to be like the full term. The fetal neurons form networks. Blood cells start to form in the red bone marrow. Digestive and respiratory tracts are developed completely after the 9th month. Fetal skin is less wrinkled now, and its shedding as well happens. In males, the testes complete their descension of the scrotum, and at this point, the fetus is 20 centimeters or about 12 inches. By the 8th month, it's 36. I'm sorry, but that's by the 8th month, and by the 9th month is about 36 centimeters, 14 inches long. Now, during the fetal period, in terms of the whole full term, how it is considered, and the circulatory system has to be ready as well. But this whole fetal period is about 266 days after fertilization. Now, after that is considered full term, those 38 weeks. At this point, the fetus is ready to be born. The scalp usually has hair, fingers and toes are well developed, and the fetus has all the organs and tissues, and now it can completely survive outside of the mother's womb. In terms of fetal circulation and cardiovascular system, they change rapidly after birth. So as soon as they're not in the placenta, they change. And they're going to, of course, now have to support the baby without the placenta. So how that looks like is of course, the heart is connected to the umbilical cord that is connected to the mother. And you have these veins and arteries. Normally, the veins bring oxygenated blood to the heart, and then the arteries bring the oxygenated blood away from the heart. But if you notice here, it is connected to the lungs. The lungs are the ones that are supposed to bring the oxygen in, and then it goes to the bloodstream. And then anything that needs to be expelled by the lungs, carbon dioxide, goes back to heart, lungs, and then through of course, the respiratory tract. Different vessels here. You have the ductus venosum, which allow blood from the umbilical cord to bypass the liver. The foramen oval is going to directly connect the right and left atria of the heart. The ductus areosum is going to be a short passage that connects the pulmonary trunk to the aorta. Remember, the pulmonary trunk brings the oxygen and releases carbon dioxide out. And then you're going to have that after birth, these vessels, they're going to close, of course, because it's not really needing them in connection to the placenta. And here you start to see that the anterior subfield seals, the oval now becomes the fossa alveolis. Then you have, after birth, the cord has to be cut, of course, and now, like I said, the whole cardiovascular system and even respiratory system have to do it on their own. Okay, so now we're going to talk about what happens to the mother's body during pregnancy. And a mother's life, the body changes dramatically. And the 9-month process of pregnancy is divided into 3 months. So the first trimester is months 1 to 3, first 12 weeks. And this is, of course, the you could say the embryonic development. At this point, the major organ systems are going to start to form, and this is the most critical stage of development. This is also where most abortions happen, or miscarriages happens in the first trimester, because it's like if the development doesn't happen successfully, that is when the organs are not developing correctly, then that can happen. This is also where pregnant women experience more morning sickness, fatigue, breast tenderness, and some women sometimes don't even experience all of these and even have experienced energy levels. The second trimester is months 4 to 6. By the way, this is before the woman was pregnant. If you notice, the uterus is as small as size. Here's the urinary bladder. It's also at its normal size. This is where the umbilicus will be, the belly button, and the diaphragm, the mammary glands. Months 4 to 6, if you notice here, now it is the second trimester. The fetus is growing, so the uterus starts to expand a little. This is at the time where if the women feel morning sickness, they feel like they don't have that. They feel more energetic, and they sometimes they even continue with the symptoms even through the second trimester. Since they don't experience all the symptoms, the women feel more comfortable, they feel safe, and now they feel better because the abortion or miscarriage phase kind of is already over. And then this time the women may feel movements of the growing fetus, but it feels like little gases here and there, not really like significant movement. By the third trimester, so 7 and 9, the fetus grows rapidly. The women also starts to gain weight because, of course, the fetus is gaining weight. Woman's uterus starts to enlarge even further. They exhibit new symptoms related to the size of the fetus, like back pain, pressure of the internal organs. You have to go urinate fast more because the bladder, if you notice, is now being suppressed by the growing fetus. And the fetus at this point is getting ready to, of course, be delivered. And the diaphragm even gets pushed up at this point as well. Mammary glands, if you notice here, they are going to expand. The breast kind of enlarge for getting the mother ready for milk production. So the HCG hormone, the human hormone, is going to have other hormonal changes through pregnancy, which I guess the ones that mainly deal with that is the secreting estrogen and progesterone. Helping with the inner lining of the uterine wall, stratum functionalis, and it's going to continue and develop. It also helps with the anterior pituitary gland, stops the reproductive cycle, of course. No other pregnancy can happen during this one. The HCG, of course, it's high levels in the first 2 months. After the first 2 months, it starts to decline. At the end of the 4th month, there's none. At this time, the corpus luteum is no longer needed. Now that you have the placenta that is taking over, and the progesterone is trying to maintain the uterine lining. Progesterone also helps with the relaxing of the corpus luteum, so it represses uterine contractions until, of course, it's ready for the birthing process. And then other hormones that are in relation to pregnancy, you have the human placental lactogen, which is going to help with the breast development and prepare the mammary glands for making milk. The melanocyte stimulating hormone, particularly responsible for darkening of the areola and nipples, and this is going to also change the skin tone in some women. Corticotropin releasing hormone is very important because that is going to determine the length of the pregnancy, longer, 8 hours, 12 hours, how many, I'm sorry, not the pregnancy, whatever months, if it's going to be a full term, premature. Other glands, aldosterone is going to secrete the adrenal cortex, which is going to promote the absorption of sodium in the kidney tubules. It's going to follow osmosis, and then it's going to increase the blood volume during pregnancy. Parathyroid hormone is going to also be secreted by the parotid glands, and it's going to maintain high concentration of calcium in the mother's blood because the fetus is demanding it a lot for the bone development. Prolactin is going to be also for stimulating milk production, and oxytocin is going to be secreted when the from the fetus to the maternal hypothalamus during the second and third trimesters, so they could help with the whole labor process, uterine contractions, and also milk release from the mammary glands. And then for the reproductive system, once again, the uterus is going to enlarge in the course of the 9 months. And before the pregnancy, the uterus was about the size of a fist. Here's where the uterus will be. And then after that, of course, it expands and grows even more. By week 28, the uterus is going to reach the umbilicus, meaning the belly button, and it is going to pull the organs up. So the lungs, any of the organs are going to be pulled up. Even the bladder is going to be being compressed, so the women are going to have to urinate more. And since even the stomach is being kind of like squished by the growing fetus, they're not going to be able to eat large meals, but they are going to be able to eat more constant. This is also going to maybe cause heartburn and even cause them to urinate frequently. And even at this point, sometimes give some back pains and lordosis, which is kind of like the curvature of the vertebrae. The mammary glands, I can already mention, but they do get enlarged significantly in the 9th month. And this is because it's getting ready to produce the milk. Of course, that's what the little baby will eat. In terms of the cardiovascular system of the mother, it does produce way more blood during pregnancy. So you could say that the heart rate does increase a little more. It needs to bring more oxygen. Oxygen is needed to, of course, help with the development fetus. So the mother's blood and cardiac output is going to increase. Blood pressure may rise. So pregnant women tend to have a little of a higher blood pressure, and even can develop varicose veins and swelling of the abdomen because it's a lot of blood output. The respiratory system, of course, it's tied to the cardiovascular. It's bringing the oxygen in from the outside. So respiratory system is also going to be working very hard. Because it is doing so, sometimes women have shortness of breath, and also because the lungs are also compressed by the growing fetus. The digestive system, it is very important that the mother has good nutrition, and it does have to eat more. They do have to eat more, about 300 extra calories per day. This is to support herself and the fetus. So it's true when they're saying that pregnant women are eating for two, because those extra calories do have to support them. In their diet, they have to include calcium, protein, iron, salt, folic acid, and these are, of course, needed for not only the fetus but also the women's body development. And when they eat food, they sometimes can also retain water and gain a lot of weight, specifically normally 28.7 pounds. because of the extra fluid food and also the growing fetus. During the first trimester, many pregnant may suffer from morning sickness. This is because there's elevated HCG, estrogen, and progesterone hormone levels, but not all women suffer morning sickness. Some women that suffer extreme morning sickness, this is called hyperemesis gravidarum. A lot of vomiting, dehydration, electrical imbalances, which ends up in them losing weight. A lot of women also experience food cravings and also food aversions because of these hormones, and sometimes because of these hormones, they can also result in constipation. The urinary system, the women's kidneys has to excrete not only her waste, but also the fetus's waste that come through the placenta. And here the glomerular filtration rate rises 50%. That is a lot, like I said, because it's eating more and then it's also releasing the fetus's waste as well. The integumentary system, the skin, during pregnancy is going to have some apparent change. Some women experience pigmentation around their eyes, their cheekbones, and the areola of the breast can also become darkened. Sometimes you can even experience stretch marks, and this is because the skin is being stretched. And fingernails and toenails, they can become stronger, thicker, and more brittle or more brittle or fragile during pregnancy. So it can either be stronger, thicker nails or brittle and fragile nails. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the pregnancy and how it ends. Of course, it ends with childbirth and also the birth of the placenta, you could say. But there's a series of events that happen, and normally at 38 weeks, that is considered like the full term or the ideal delivery or childbirth. And the fetal adrenal cortex, because they do have an adrenal cortex by then, they're going to produce cortisol. The cortisol is then going to stimulate in the placenta, and then this is going to cause the mother to produce a high amount of estrogen. High estrogen is going to stimulate the uterus to form oxytocin receptors, which oxytocin is then going to start the whole labor contractions. You're going to call the Braxton Hicks contractions. Even though their contractions is called false labor because they really do not result in the 3 stages of labor yet. Both fetal hypothalamus and maternal hypothalamus, they secrete oxytocin, so that happy hormone, and it is going to then cause the cervix to dilate and increase the uterine contractions, which we know that they're necessary for birth. So here this is considered to be positive feedback. So the both the fetuses is going to release oxytocin, the mother also. So here you can see the little fetus is releasing the hypothalamus of the fetus releasing oxytocin. Also, the adrenal cortex is releasing those hormones. They go through the placenta. The mother is going to receive them. Also, the oxytocin from the mother is going to be released there. And then it's going to cause the contractions and everything ready for the birth. So the hormone that is needed for dilation is called oxytocin, but sometimes Pitocin is a synthetic one. Sometimes when they need to, I guess, speed up the childbirth, the Pitocin will kind of be the synthetic portion of oxytocin. And during the first stages of childbirth, the first one's dilation stage. This is when the cervix is fully dilated, expanded to 10 centimeters, 3.9 inches in diameter. That is when labor begins. If you notice here, this is called the cervical canal that is closed. After that, then it is going to be ruptured. And now the little fetus is, or now the baby's head is now exposed to the opening. This is kind of like when your water breaks. That is when, like I said, the cervical canal opens and all the fluid from the inside just comes out. Now the expulsion stage, this is when the full dilation is done and now the newborn is ready to come out. It would take a few hours, sometimes it could take more than that as well. But this is the cervix is what is its strongest, it's fully dilated, there's strong contractions frequently, and this is to, of course, help the mother push or bear down the fully developed baby now. So the first thing that comes out or should come out is first the head. This is called crowning. And sometimes it is, I guess a woman's body is not capable of pushing it out. Sometimes there is tearing, but there is some incisions that are made to help widen the vagina at this point. If the buttocks are first coming out instead of the head, then it is considered to be breached. Sometimes even when the umbilical cord wraps around the fetus, it result in a C-section, which is the incision of cutting all the layers, starting from the skin all the way to the placenta, so the little baby is removed. The placental stage, once the little newborn is born, I guess childbirth is not fully finished. The placenta stage is when the placenta is removed from the women's body. So you could say that after the childbirth, the placenta is also birthed, you could say. This is where there is a lot of blood loss, and if not treated, then it could result in infection. Okay, so now getting to the changes of the newborn. Once the newborn, after the newborn, well, the fetus now is born from the mother's body, now it is considered a newborn. So the neonatal period or the newborn neonate is when there's physiological adjustments, so that now the newborn has to breathe on its own and do everything on its own in terms of breathing, obtaining nutrients, excreting waste, and maintaining its own body temperature. So for example, here I have this table that shows you that there is a specific score, it's called the APGAR score, that the newborns are tested after birth, and that way they make sure that they have a healthy baby. A healthy baby will be 8 to 10. If it is lower than that, then there's something to be concerned for. So skin color, it has to be pink, uh, of course, dark and skin babies, and the mouth palms, all the colors look good. If not, it will be pale or blue. The pulse rate has to be over 100 beats per minute. Respiratory level, regular breathing, no slow or irregular breathing, and they need to hear a strong cry because that's the means the muscles are healthy. I'm sorry, the lungs are healthy. Muscular activity, there has to be active movement, has to be muscle tone. The tones have to be strong that way. And then the grimace is when there's reflexes of the body. So when it is touched or done something on the foot, it has to have those reflexes. If not, then there's something wrong with the nervous system probably. Okay, so when the newborn takes the first breath, of course, now the lungs are supposed to support it. So it inflates the alveoli lung for the first time. This is going to decrease blood pressure in the lungs, and this is, of course, for the lungs and the heart to adjust. So the lungs and the circulatory system. The neonatal respiratory rate is 3 to 60 breaths per minute. The heart rate is 120 to 140, so it does beat faster than adults. But this is because they have smaller capacity for sustaining large amounts of oxygen like we do. Newborns are born with brown fat, which is fat tissue, but after the 5th month, they develop something that we call white fat, which is normally what adults have. Although the kidneys are almost fully developed after birth, they're still less capable of concentrating urine. So that's why the newborn's diet only strictly has to be just the mother's milk and that's it. After that, then they can start solids and all that, which now the kidneys can support. So after the first 6 weeks after the baby's birth is considered the postpartum period, so the first 6 weeks. This is when the mother is going to go through another major changes in her body. Homeostasis, meaning now going back to its normal pre-pregnancy levels. But lactation here is now supposed to be the focus. And this is, of course, milk produced by the mother, so it feeds the babies. And it is, of course, released by positive feedback. So the baby sucking on the mother's nipple is going to then release these hormones in the mother's brain, and it is now going to secrete the glands in the mammary glands, meaning endomorphins, which are the hormones, and that should help with the milk production. And of course, unfortunately, because the mother is going through a lot of changes, there's a lot of hormonal changes, levels of estrogen, progesterone, CRH are all linked to depression. This is called postpartum depression, or called the baby blues, which is normal because, like I said, hormones are being trying to get balance, and after that, then they should go back to normal. Respiratory and digestive systems, they of course have go back to the pre-pregnancy levels. Excess fluid in the mother is retained through pregnancy. So here there's a lot of blood fluid being moved, and urine might increase as well. Other skin pigmentations can go back to how they were before as well. Lactation is very important, like mentioned before, and this is of course providing milk for the baby. The alveoli, which is in the mother's breast, are going to grow and have lactoferous ducts, which they're expelled by the sucking mouth of the baby. And the first few days, something called colostrum is produced. It's kind of like this very yellow fluid, but it is going to have very little fat, less lactose, and it's going to contain a protein that is very rich in AGA antibodies. That's why they say that colostrum is very important. And I guess the first milk from the mother that has a colostrum is good because it has these IgA antibodies. These IgA antibodies are going to have immunity transferred to the little baby from the mother. And then in terms of the changes, like I said, the antibodies are produced in the milk. They're needed for the baby's, I guess, immune system. Sometimes when there is the red blood cells are broken down after birth, it can result in accumulation of the bilirubin, which can cause jaundice. But normally jaundice, once it can take a couple of days to go away once the little baby system is regulated. Oxytocin is responsible for ejection of the milk of the alveolar valve. So when the little baby is sucking on the mother's nipple, it releases oxytocin that should give it like a happy feeling, and milk more will be produced as well. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the last section of the lecture, and it's hereditary, talking about how the sperm fertilizes the egg or the oocyte. We do have to talk about this. So hereditary is a transmission of genetic changes from parent to offspring, and it is going to be inherited, you could say. This is the field of genetics. So genes are segments of DNA that's specific for a protein, and these proteins are going to be the function molecules of the cells. So every single individual has genes. Where do we get the genes? Is from the sperm and the egg, from the mother and the father. Now these proteins that are making bulk, these proteins are needed for body structure. So genes are basically the blueprints. You could say they're the blueprints, they're the instructions of how every single organism, but in this case humans, develop, grow, and all of that. So the individual DNA, or this whole genome, is a combination of all these DNA bases, A, T, C, and G, adenine, thymine, guanine, and cytosine. There's about 3.2 million nucleotides and about 20,000 genes in the human genome. So there's about 20,000 genes for all these proteins. And when I guess the individuals, when you look at the cells, they have 46 chromosomes. What does that mean? Is that 23 pairs, two pairs of the 23 chromosomes, and each of the chromosomes has some of those 20,000 genes. Okay, so going back to this hereditary concept, so the sperm has 23 chromosomes, and the oocyte or the egg has 23. So the individual gets 23 chromosomes from the mother and 23 from the father. So you could say two copies. One copy gets it from the mother, one from the father. A total of 46. And chromosomes 1 to 22 carry regular genes. X and Y are the 23 pairs are the sex chromosomes, so the X and Y determine the sex of an individual. If it's a female, it's going to have two X chromosomes, so we got one X from the mother, one X from the father. If it's a male, it's one X and one Y. The mother gave it the X because they only have two X chromosomes, and the sperm, the male, gave it the Y chromosome. And these full sets of 23 chromosomes, like I said, they are going to be from the parents. Of course, there's abnormalities. This is considered a genetic disorder. Sometimes there is mutations in the DNA. Sometimes individuals have more chromosomes than they're supposed to, or they have less. I guess the example that I can give you is Down syndrome. Chromosome pair number 23. Instead of having two, they have three pairs. I'm sorry, three chromosomes there. So genes and alleles, they're going to, like I said, code for the same trait. So your mother and your father, for example, gave you the gene for the color of the eyes. So the mother gave you one allele and the dad gave you another one. Let's say that mom gave you the color for brown eyes. It's the same gene, but the father gave you the color for blue. So it's the same gene, the gene for the color of the eyes. It's just that it could be different alleles. So both parents could either give you the same allele or they could give you different ones as well. The genes are not necessarily identical. Like I said, they can have different variations because of the alleles, or also the color of your hair. Mother gives you the allele brown, but father gives you the allele black. It is the same gene, meaning the gene of the color of the hair, it's just you have different alleles. And you could go back to chapter 26 to, if you want to reiterate on this. Okay, so in terms of biology, how do you, I guess, determine the different types of allele? If the allele is the same trait, let's say gene for the color of the eyes, it's brown and brown. So mother gave you brown, dad gave you brown, that is homozygous. If they are different alleles, the same gene but different alleles, then it's heterozygous, meaning mother gave you blue eyes and father gave you brown. It's the same gene for the color of the eyes, it's just different alleles. Now, in terms of alleles, some have the ability to mask others, so overpower other alleles. These are considered to be dominant. And the ones that are masked, the ones that are not overpowering, they're considered recessive. Dominant alleles are going to be written in capital letters, and recessive alleles are going to be in lowercase letters. What does that mean is that, let's say you have the allele for brown for mother and the allele for, let's say, blue for father. It doesn't matter that you have the blue, you're going to have brown color eyes because the brown color is dominant. The only time you can have blue eyes is if you have both of the alleles, meaning mother gave you blue, father gave you blue, so they both have to be present. And genotype versus phenotype, this is, genotype is a genetic makeup of the individual, so the combination of those ATCGs, and the phenotype is what is expressed. So the gene for the color of the eyes is just a combination of the DNA. Phenotype is what is expressed, meaning the specific color. Like I said, these alleles can be passed down to the offspring. Okay, so here we have an example. Like I said, dominant are written in uppercase, and recessive, they're written in lowercase. And dominant are always going to win, you could say. So let's say here that we have the gene for dimples. Either you're going to have dimples or not. Having dimples is dominant, so capital D. No dimples is recessive, lowercase d. So here you have the sperm from dad that is dominant for dominant dimples, and then mother also has dominant for dimples. So if this egg fertilizes these eggs, this is homozygous. Why? Is because you have the same form of the allele. The individual is going to have dimples. Let's say that the sperm is dominant for dimples. The egg is recessive, meaning no dimples. The individual is still going to have dimples. Why? Is because remember, as long as that dominant dimple allele is present, it's going to be expressed. And it is heterozygous because it's different alleles, dimples and no dimples. Same thing over here. Recessive dimples for dad, dominant dimples for mother. It's still going to have dimples. Why? Is because dominant is there. Only when the two recessives are received, then it's going to be no dimples. So recessive for no dimples dad, recessive no dimples mom, then the individual is going to be homozygous and have no dimples. Freckles as well is the same thing. Freckles is dominant, and then the not present is also going to be recessive. Unfortunately, even inheritance can also be passed down in terms of diseases or conditions. This is when, for example, the traits have incomplete dominance, so meaning the heterozygous genotypes, they're going to have the trait, and only when the two recessives are present, that's when the disease happens. So let's talk about sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell is when the hemoglobin protein that is found in red blood cells is going to give it this round shape, circular shape. If they have the sickle cell trait, then it's going to be flattened, and that's when anemia is developed. So let's say here that you have capital S is normal hemoglobin, so normal red blood cell, and lowercase is a sickle cell, that flat one. So dad has capital S, mother has capital S, so dominant, normal red blood cell. Dad has capital S, mom has a recessive. Here, the individual's blood is still going to be normal, but they're going to be carriers. So that means that their children might have the sickle cell disease. Same thing here, lowercase for normal, lowercase for sickle, uppercase for normal. They're still going to have the normal allele, but they are carriers for the sickle cell trait. And then sperm, lowercase for sickle cells, mother, lowercase for sickle cells. The little offspring is going to develop sickle cell anemia because they have the lowercase as well. By the way, this whole square example is called a Punnett square, which is going to predict the possible genotype. So how are the offspring are going to look like? It's a prediction. Which sperm and which egg are going to go through fertilization is just random. It's not really known. I know that through the in vitro and all that, now you can control it, but naturally it's just random. You're never going to know which sperm with different alleles is going to fertilize which egg of different alleles as well. There's even multiple allele traits, meaning that there's human traits that are involved in multiple alleles. For example, it's not two alleles only. An example would be the blood types A, B, and O. This is considered codominance. So meaning that if the mother and the father have a specific allele, both are going to be dominant, you could say. So let's say here that dad is blood type B, mother is blood type A. The baby is going to have blood type A and B. So here, none of them are recessive. They're both dominant, so they're going to be expressed. By the way, the I by itself represents blood type O. So here, the father is blood type O, mother is A. The mother's only going to be type A because blood type O is not really expressing that antigen. Blood type O with blood type, blood type B with blood type I is going to be blood type B. Why is because B has that antigen. And then only when you have I and I, no antigens, you're going to have blood type O as well. So here, blood type A and B, you could say that they are codominant. If they are passed down from the parents, you could have both or just one. And then in terms of determining the sex of the individual, like I said, females have two X chromosomes. So all of their eggs are going to have X chromosomes. And males, they have X and Y. So their sperms are half X and half Y. So how is the sex of the individual determined? If the sperm has the X and the female the egg has the X, then it will be a female because females have two X. If the sperm gives the X and the female X, same thing. If the sperm has the Y and the egg has the X, then it will be a male. And then coming to the last slide, the polygenetic inheritance patterns, these are going to be the most inherited traits that are controlled by combined effects of two or more genes, and this is called a polygenetic inheritance. For example, the traits of the polygenetic inheritance include height, skin color, and eye color. Height is not really like, oh, we just have people that are 4, 5, 6, and 7. It's like 5'2", 5'3", 6'2", and all that. Same thing with skin color. You don't have white and brown. You have like blending in between. And even the colors, I know I gave you the example, but sometimes you could have like a combination of like blue and green or like brown and like green. So it's not really, sometimes it cannot be just a specific color. And for example, here, this factor represents that you could have, there's genes that are going to give you the tall height, but then you also have genes that can also reduce your height. So for example, this individual that has the tall height, but it also has a reducing gene, if you notice the individual that has a tall height and has no height reduction, they're taller, which are 6'5". So sometimes you could have the height, the tall gene, but then you have the gene that reduces the height, and then you are tall, but not as tall as like the individual that is tall and doesn't have that height gene reduction. Of course, even though the traits are passed down, sometimes those traits are not expressed in the individual because of environmental factors. For example, let's say that the individual was meant to be tall, but it doesn't reach its full height because it malnutrition, there was disease, or something happened that it prevented him from, or her, from reaching its full height. That concludes the end of the lecture. Thank you.